We started the conference with some general discussions about what it means to be a prosecutor, and we're kind of ending on the same note. So I'm going to throw out some general questions and just ask what your views are. And but as we've talked about before, the bios of this illustrious group is in your little booklets. 3 of these panelists have been up before, so starting here immediately to my right is Dan Satterberg, the District Attorney of King County, Washington, which is Seattle. Next to him, Mike Freeman, the County Attorney of Hennepin County, also known as Minneapolis to most. Sitting next to him, DA Darcel Clark from Bronx County, New York. And next to her, District Attorney General Amy Wyridge from Shelby County, better known as Memphis. So thank you for joining us. So I'm just going to throw out a few questions. We're going to try and maybe truncate this a little bit because we've had a long day. But what do you think the public perception of a prosecutor is today? Dan, do you want to start with that one?
No, I want Amy to start.
Okay. He's tired from the last panel. All right.
I'll be happy to. Thank you. I think the public perception of a prosecutor is confused. How many of you all are out in the community day in and day out and are startled when you ask questions of the public of what the DA's office does? And 9 times out of 10 you get an answer that doesn't fit anywhere close to what we do. I think there's a small segment of the population that we serve that understands our role, and there's a very large segment of the population that is confused by what truth is because of the mixed messages from media in all shapes and sizes. I think it's getting perhaps a little better in certain arenas in terms of the community engagement, but I think there's still a lot of work to do on our shoulders and on the shoulders of our staffs to, at every opportunity, to inform and educate the public about exactly what it is we do, how we do it, and what our role is as it relates to public safety.
Yeah, I think they don't understand what we do, and a lot of times we get blamed for stuff that we don't even do, you know. And it's not just the public, it's also our law enforcement partners at times that don't even understand our role and what we should do. It causes a lot of friction sometimes between police departments. You know, I am the prosecutor that's in charge of prosecuting cases that happen on Rikers Island. And my predecessor didn't have a good relationship with the union of the corrections officers. And when I tried to bridge that gap, they were just saying some outrageous things, and comes to find out that they didn't even understand the role of the DA. For example, when inmates are, whether or not a judge decides to set bail on a case, they thought that the DAs set the bail. I was like, you're in law enforcement. How could that be that you don't understand that it's the judges? And it was little things like that, but it just took sitting down and having discussions with them so that they could, provide the information, in terms that they can understand. So law enforcement, you speak one language, the community, you speak another. So it doesn't mean you go out in the community, yes, the prosecutor's in charge of, misdemeanor crimes, felonies, and, speak all that legalese. They're not going to understand it. But if they know that your job is to make the public safe, that it's your job to represent victims of crime, to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, then they understand it more. So, I think it's a lack of knowledge on the basis of the community and even some of our law enforcement partners as to what we do.
First, Chris, that was very nice what you did for Sim, because he's a superstar. But I have a bitch. You have me the last person before lunch, and then you have me the last person before cocktail hour.
That's because you're so scintillating.
That's
I know
not
you keep them
really
away.
a great time. I could say, as I used to early in my career, that I run the county attorney's office, 200 lawyers, 10,000 adult felonies, 7,000 juvenile cases. I do not run the police department. Friends, it doesn't work anymore. They are looking for an adult in the room who they can feel comfortable with. My biggest suggestion to all of us is to figure out quietly what our message is before we talk to the press. They're looking for someone who can explain things that don't make sense sometimes, that they feel can make decisions. And even if they disagree with the decision, they know the person they're listening to worked very hard to understand it and did the best they can. And that takes, I couldn't have said that 15 years ago. There's not a whole lot good about getting older. Your hair gets thinner, your waistline gets bigger, but maybe your judgment gets a little better. Don't hesitate to do that. Listen to our preachers. Our preachers hesitate and they pause. We lawyers can do that as well.
Chris, I think you said it, and I feel it every day. I get criticized for being too tough, and I get criticized for being soft on crime. And I think when I started out, and I was chief of staff for 17 years, starting in 1990, so I've been in the leadership of the office for 28 years, and I had the view that all I did was, if I enforced the law, then I was doing justice. And then I grew up at some point during that time, and I realized that things could be completely legal and totally wrong at the same time, and that made things so much more complicated. And then we started to let the humanity of the work kind of seep in, and that got even more complicated. And I realized that the social problems that come to the courthouse, whether it's drug addiction or mental illness or developing teenage brains, domestic violence, all these things come to us not because we're the best option, but because we're the only option. We've already been built. And the things that really could work better haven't been built yet for the most part. And so to become a reformer in the criminal justice system, to me, means that you have to build stuff that isn't there. And you have to do it in partnership with the community to find more effective solutions. So the job has actually gotten a lot more complicated over the years, but it's also a lot more fun.
A lot more challenging. So I think we've learned, and we don't have to repeat this, that the role of the prosecutor has evolved tremendously over the past 10 years in many different ways. And I'm hoping that each of you can give me an example of something going on in your office that maybe you've not already talked about here to demonstrate that new role of a prosecutor, something that you are doing that demonstrates this new and broader and challenging scope of work that prosecutors are now facing. Who wants to start? Amy?
Order.
Yep, okay, we're orderly people, yeah.
I've been the district attorney since 2011. I grew up in the office. I started there in 1991 as a baby prosecutor, and the bane of our office has always been what we call in Tennessee driving on a revoked license. In your jurisdictions, it's unlicensed drivers. It's those individuals who have not complied with everything they need to comply with to have a valid driver's license. There have been years in our office that we have had 30 to 40,000 driving on revoked cases. My jurisdiction is Shelby County, a little less than 1 million people, very poor. My biggest customer is the Memphis Police Department, but it's a huge problem. So we have been looking at that issue. How do we enforce the law, do our job as it relates to public safety, but do it in a way that's smart? And so we gathered the data, we had a lot of conversations, a lot of debates in-house, tried some things using the judges to help us, and found that they were not cooperative, and finally just realized on my own that if we were going to fix this problem, I had to fix it, that we had to do it within our own office and just do what we could do. And so what we have recently done, it's 1 month into its existence, and we'll get the numbers at the end of the month, but what we have done is implemented a policy that we are no longer going to prosecute certain categories of unlicensed drivers. If you are in that status because you owe money, and in the state of Tennessee, my good friend Steve Crump is here with me from Tennessee, and we've got a few others. Our legislature, anytime they want to find a way to increase the coffers, it's driving on revoked. They add that. So if you don't do certain things, or if you do certain things, we're going to take your license away. So what we've done in our office is implemented a policy that says if you owe money because of back court obligations or back speeding tickets, or because you owe money to child support, to the child support agencies, we are not going to prosecute those cases anymore. The police department will still arrest you. We can't control that. But once we touch those cases and have had an opportunity to screen them and find out the reason for the revocation, if it is because of money, we're done. We're kicking those cases and get them out of the court as quickly as possible. After 4 days of that policy, one of my General Sessions courtrooms had already eliminated 40% of their docket. So we're hopeful that it's going to continue to have that impact on getting the congestion and the crap off the docket and allowing our assistants to use their time in a way that moves the public safety needle. When I brought our prosecutors together, we've got about 117 prosecutors. When I brought them all together to announce this policy, I had a young prosecutor raise his hand and he said, well, basically what you're doing is giving us time to do things that really matter for the community. I said, you are right and you are hired. You can now be the District Attorney General. But anyway, so I'll keep you guys posted on it, but so far it feels right and it's had a great impact. Just internally, the office feels kind of this load lifted off of them, and we'll see what the long-term impact is.
Amy, it wasn't a dismissal. They were referred to another type of court, right? Like more summons kind of court?
No,
How
we're killing them.
You're
Done.
okay?
Out of here.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. So you want to know what new things or new approaches we have to doing the job?
Right, just something that you think epitomizes sort of this new role of a prosecutor, sort of how you feel that your office is demonstrating this new role.
Well, I talked a lot about it during the other session. I mean, my mission or my mission statement for the office is pursuing justice with integrity. And when I interview new assistants now, I ask them that question. Our motto is pursuing justice with integrity. What does that mean to you? Because I think it's important that we know as prosecutors, again, I keep talking about this balance. All this criminal justice reform is great. I'm all in favor of it. I'm doing all kinds of things, diversion programs, drug treatment programs for the high utilizer, heroin addicts. But at the same time, we got to make sure that our victims, and when they hear us doing all of these great things, that it doesn't get lost that they are our first priority, victims first. So again, my approach has always been, when I do something in criminal justice reform that's in favor of the accused, we always make sure you have something to do, something for the victims as well. And two things that I've come up with as far as the victims are concerned and prevention is in the area of domestic violence, which we all know that these problems are skyrocketing, and we have a lot of incidents of domestic violence in the Bronx. But at the same time, we had such a rate of people not going forward. Either they call the police and they decide not to prosecute, or they do file the charges and then they never cooperate and we have to dismiss it. So, I wanted to do things to, one, help prevent things from happening, try to foresee, something that may happen in the domestic violence realm, and then also to do something to help them when they do come in. So one of the things I did was start a domestic violence complaint room. So when the police arrest somebody for a domestic violence crime, instead of going to our general complaint room where they meet an assistant DA who would write up the case, and you meet the victim, and that person keeps the case from beginning to end, I started a separate complaint room just for domestic violence in a more comfortable area. The cases are written up by the domestic violence assistants themselves that are going to handle that case, and we are co-located with the city's Family Justice Center. So all the services that are provided in the areas of domestic violence are right there with us. So as we go through trying to find out whether or not a victim wants to proceed, they have the assistant DA there to make sure that they have somebody they can talk to, that they know who's going to be their lawyer as they go through. We have a victim advocate there that works for my office that makes sure that they know that they'll be able to have follow-up for services. And then being in the Justice Center, if they have a housing problem, health insurance, whatever the case may be, trying to get to a safe place we have all those services for them. So even if they decide that they don't want to cooperate or prosecute, as the prosecutor, still making sure they get some kind of wraparound services so that the next time around, they'll remember that the DA's off, you know what? I didn't go forward before, but they were nice, they were interested, they made sure I had a safe place to go. Maybe they'll do it the next time. So that's something that we decided to do that's dedicated to those victims to make it a more comfortable atmosphere. And you know, it shows that we care and that first and foremost that their safety is important for us. Another part of a domestic violence prevention type of service that we're providing, we started the first strangulation initiative. And what that is that strangulation, people that strangle people in domestic violence or otherwise, strangulation is a bellwether, or it's a sign that those things escalate. That's the type of crime that is an indicator that it can lead to death. Forget about, you know, the dangerousness and the health causes that happen when somebody strangles you. But that person who did that strangling this time, chances are, and the data shows that they may eventually cause the death of a person. So we've worked with the New York City Police Department so that when these domestic violence calls happen, and let's say the perpetrator is not there, but of course they are known perpetrator, it's just a matter of finding them. When they speak to those victims and they tell the police that there was attempted strangulation or they were strangled, we take those complaints and we make contact with those victims right away, even before the arrest happened, so that we can work up the case and have everything ready so that when we finally find the perpetrator, we've already given services to the victim, and we also have the case all ready so once they come in, you know, we can move it forward. You know, we just started that this year, and we're really hoping to see, you know, some results.
Terrific, thank you. Mike?
Darcel, that's a really great idea. We started the Domestic Abuse Service Center, a one-stop shop for victim survivors of domestic abuse where they can get counseling, referrals, advice. We can interview them, we can help them prepare orders for protection and criminal complaints. And our goal is to do it within 3 hours. And you've added another perspective that I'm going to take home. Thank you very much. But I want to talk about what I think is the biggest challenge to the prosecutors today. That's officer-involved shootings. We've had them since all of us began, but they are bigger issues now. They are more in the media, they are more in the community, and they are very difficult cases. After having several, I reviewed our process in Minnesota and decided to discontinue using the grand jury. On the face of it, the grand jury seems to make sense. It's 23 people, people from the community who are making the charging decision. That seems better than one prosecutor. But the problem is nobody knows who they are, and there's no accountability. And because of the rules of the grand jury, if you have a grand jury, they know Bill, what the DA can do is walk out and say, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the press. In the case of officer such and such, the grand jury has no bill to thank you very much." That's totally inadequate. Now, Bob McCullough and Ferguson had a quirk in law in Missouri that allowed him to issue the transcript, and he did that. But we can't do that in Minnesota. So I disbanded the use of the grand jury. I make the decision. Now, obviously, I do it with top prosecutors in my office, but we also then can, and we do, have a detailed press conference in which we explain everything about the case, all about the law and all about the facts. And then we put that summary, all the police reports, the forensics, the video, even the autopsies on our website. Modern technology allows me to share with everyone everything we do. And that level of transparency has begun to create some trust in the decisions we have to make. Yes, Black Lives Matter is not happy with me for not charging, in 2 different cases, white police officers who shot young African-American males, one with a gun, one without. The evidence wasn't there, ladies and gentlemen, and our job is to view the evidence and apply it to the law. But at least they knew who made the decision and they can see the facts. And I think that was an important breakthrough, and I wouldn't have gotten here on that without the help of Cy Vance, Dan Conley, Sim Gill, Jackie Lacey, all of whom I called when I was stuck with a very difficult decision, what should I do? I'm thankful for my sisters and brothers who practice this art and who try to do justice every day. And I commend you if you're still stuck with a grand jury, you can break out of the system, because in most places, you get to decide whether you're going to use a grand jury. And I think that's probably one of the best decisions I've made in my 20 years.
So drug addiction has swept our nation, claiming 60 to 70,000 lives annually in America. Every family that I know has been touched by it, including my own. And while we talk about it in 2018, that drug addiction is a medical condition, and we say we can't arrest our way out of it, we don't actually act like that. We don't act like we believe that. And for the last 7 years, we've been doing something in Seattle to give police officers a community health option for their tool belt. When they arrest somebody for a small amount of drugs or a drug-related crime, they can call a case manager from our LEAD program. LEAD stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, law enforcement being the first 2 words of the program, meaning it's an option that the police can use. It's helped people, the people who are helped in the LEAD program, re-offend at a much, much lower level, and it's a harm reduction format. It's unconditional love and support from the community, from case managers who go to the police station within an hour of getting a call from the police for that warm handoff. We are now ready to take LEAD to scale in King County. It's been in parts of downtown Seattle, and it's going to cost us some money, but in order to take it to scale, in order to really walk the talk that we believe this is a medical condition, I announced a couple of weeks ago that I'm no longer going to file charges of drug possession for people who have a personal use amount on them that is under 1 gram of heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. Instead, the police can still arrest, and the police will be able to call for someone to come start working with that person immediately. The police weren't super happy about it. Got a lot of crossed arms, but none of them became officers so they could spend a half a shift booking a heroin addict in jail, knowing that they're going to go through withdrawal symptoms and get no help. I mean, we have a drug court. I'm sure you all have drug courts. We've had one for 25 years, and it has a capacity of 350 people. And the people who are in our drug court who are doing well are all facing prison if they fail. So there's lots of incentive, and it's a well-funded program. But our drug problem is a lot bigger than 350 people. And 10 years ago, I made the decision to put what's technically a felony, with possession of these drugs, into the misdemeanor court, thinking I was doing people a favor. But when we went back and looked at it last year, we realized that these cases take almost a year to resolve. 1.5 warrants are issued in each case because people fail to appear to court because they're drug addicted. And we used 15,000 jail days in our county jail in 1 year, just cycling people through this long process. So it takes a year on the due process train. At the end of the day, here's your gross misdemeanor, now go home, or go back to your tent, or go back to your addiction, and never was the system set up to help anybody. So we're trying to build a countywide network, community-based health, a harm reduction approach to help people with drug problems, and to really show that we're serious about it. I'm not going to put those cases into court anymore. That's going to save about $3 million a year for the justice system, and to stand up the LEAD program for the next 2 years. We got an additional $3 million from a different pot of money. Probably at the end of the day, it'll take about $9 million to put this throughout the entire county. But we're gonna walk our talk. We're gonna say if you're addicted to drugs, that you need help, and we're gonna provide the infrastructure to get you that help within an hour of your arrest. And we're no longer going to jam you into court. So we'll see how that works.
All very interesting programs. So just asking a shorter question, given, you sort of walked over the hot coals, all of you, and you've seen the ins and outs of the difficulties of your job. If a newly elected prosecutor came to you and asked for advice, what would you tell them? Amy?
Wow. No sudden movement, I think would be the first words out of my mouth. Spend a lot of time talking, and really more time listening, but a lot of time having coffee, lunch, dinner, cocktails, whatever it takes with people inside of your office and outside of your office. The people that have always been there, that have always been supportive, and then the people that are always there screaming at you. Get to know them and listen to them. But so no sudden movements in the first couple of months, and then trust your gut. I think I grew up in the office, as I said. Many of you in the room grew up in the offices that you now lead, and you trusted your gut when you were picking a jury. You trusted your gut when you were evaluating the worth of a case. You trusted your gut when you decided how to handle a case and what offer to make to a defense attorney. Trust your gut sitting in that office. It's what got you to that position, and it will continue to serve you well. Surround yourself with people that you trust, that have your back, that will not just nod their head and say, yes ma'am, that will tell you when you're being an idiot, tell you when you're missing something, or tell you when there's a better way to do something. And make sure your family's ready. I think that's a big part of it. If you've campaigned to get there, your family's been through hell already, but really the challenges are just beginning once you take office. So make sure your family life and the support system that you need is there, because at the end of the day, your kids and your spouse don't really care what happened at the office, but they want to, they gotta have you, and they gotta understand and appreciate and be proud of the work that you're doing. So make sure that that's all intact.
I would say a lot of things that people should told me and I didn't listen. One thing is like, if there's people there that you know you're not going to get along with or don't buy your vision, get rid of them in the beginning. Don't wait till the last minute. And you know what? That's easier said than done, especially if you grew up in the office and you know the people. So I didn't do that right away. I did it with a couple of people, and I know I was right then. But those where I was like, oh, let me wait and see. 2 years later, I should have done it. But you don't know that until you go through it. But I think what's most important is that you know what you want your vision to be for the office. You have to learn how to communicate that to your staff and make sure that they have the buy-in so that you can get it done. Because if you have the vision and it's only you having it and the people that have to effectuate it are not going to do it, you're not going to be successful. And that's something, again, that you learn with time. I knew what my vision was. I thought that my executive staff was helping me push it down to the rank and file, the boots on the ground. And as I heard other things outside, I found out that it wasn't really happening. So I had to, press the reset and figure out a different way of doing things. So as I developed policies that I wanted to have for the office, what I did was I used my executive team to find, let's do the research. How is it being done across the country? Who's doing it well? Where have things not worked? And get the best practices. Speaking to people like Chris Hammond, I brought her on as a consultant to really help us shape the things that we wanted to do. And once we came up with something, instead of just announcing that this is what I'm doing, I used them and myself to go out to the boots on the ground and have like these town halls or round tables in the office to speak to the assistants that had to actually do the work. And once we got their feedback, they were able to tell us, some of the things that they thought it would work, it wouldn't, how to tweak things. We got real valuable lessons on the work that we're doing and how the people that we had there were going to do it. So for example, when I talked about bail reform and really coming up with a policy for the misdemeanor bail reform, and I told them if we're not asking for jail, then we shouldn't be asking for bail. We switched it around now. The default was people should be released unless there's a reason not to, and they have to justify that. When we pushed that out to the line assistants, some of them said, well, if they're not in jail, how do you expect us to get a plea? That was eye-opening, because that showed me that if you think that that's how we're doing, that this is the way we should be doing this work, you got it wrong. That's not the way we should do it, because that was not part of my vision. But I had to know that there were people out there that thought that. I would never think that, but you have to hear it from them to know. So once we had those conversations and really talked to them about why it was important to do this and what is going on nationally, and, you know, to make sure that they were up to date with the research and things going on across the country, because all those files they have on their desk, that's all they know. They don't get to read the paper or the law journal or, you know, law review articles or always come to conferences like these to be up on what's new and exciting and cutting edge. But once we got them involved and they gave their input, then I came up with the total policy, and then we pushed it out. And once we did, they were able to follow it, so I got the buy-in. So I would say make sure that you get the buy-in from the people that are working for you to make sure that they have the same vision. And you'll find out that some don't, some still won't agree with it, and then that means that there needs to be, you know, a change for that particular person, perhaps in another office.
I have two thoughts. First off, the newly elected prosecutor is in charge. You're the boss. You get to make the decisions, but you do not have to flaunt the fact that you do. When the young lawyer comes in with their supervisor and the next supervisor up on a tough case, don't ask the supervisor first what they want to do. Ask the young lawyer. You don't have to tell them if you've already decided. You get to listen to them, and maybe they're going to teach you something, because ultimately you get to make the decision. You don't have to flaunt it. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You're the boss. And the more I listen to other people and get their input, the better I do. The other thing for the newly elected prosecutor is you are not in this alone. You have sisters and brothers who are in the same profession, who care about you and are willing to give you time and their ideas and their advice. As I mentioned a few names before, I have never called another elected prosecutor who hasn't returned my call within the next 24 hours. Sisters and brothers know we need their help, and you need to ask them, and on the other side, you better return those calls. That's a call you don't go home unless you do. And you learn something from it, but it also helps you understand you're not in it alone.
I would say two things. First, your superpower is prosecutorial discretion. It is a wonderful blessing. It's inherent in the fact that you were elected, that you get to make decisions. And there are two types of prosecutorial discretion. There's the unilateral prosecutorial discretion, like Amy just suggested, with no longer filing driving while licensed suspended cases. And I made that decision about 6 years ago. It was costing a ton of money and doing nobody any good, and I made the decision all by myself and could do that. But then there's the discretion that you share with your community, in a community justice format, where we share our power and our problems with community partners and develop schemes to build alternatives, because criminal justice reform is all about building things that aren't there yet. And together, we can build things and we can sustain them through funding. So much of what I do now is to go out and try to find money to start programs in the community. And some groups, I've actually helped them become nonprofits so they can raise their own money by putting them in touch with law firms in town. So you have discretion, and you can exercise it all by yourself, or you can do it in partnership if you really want it to stick around longer than you. And the other thing I would say is if you want a friend, you should get a dog.
Dogs are good at it, you know. There's some DAs who have Facebook pages for their comfort dogs. It's very effective. Yeah, very effective. So, turning this question around in the other direction, I teach a prosecutor practicum at Georgetown Law, and my students say to me that many of the other students give them a hard time about wanting to be a prosecutor. And so, what would you say to a young law student about why it would be a good thing to become a prosecutor? Why are we all here? How do you sell the job? Amy, I guess we're being orderly. We're starting with you. Yeah.
I can't imagine doing anything else with my law license. I can't imagine a job that allows us to change lives. And it's an incredible power that we have, but with that power comes great responsibility. But you all have had the same encounters in the grocery store that I've had, of people coming up to you and saying, I know you, and you have that panic moment of, is this somebody that I've, gotten into it with? Is this somebody that loves me or hates me? And oftentimes that hug and those tears are from an individual who says, you saved my life because you fought my request for probation. You were my prosecutor many, many years ago, and because of what you said and did, I went to prison and I got away from those people, and I'm now, here's my son, and he's going through school, and I've graduated, and this would not have happened without you. On the flip side of that are the hugs that we've all gotten from the victims, from the families, from those whose lives we have taken to the finish line. So I really can't imagine doing anything else. And I think for somebody coming out of law school, it's a great opportunity to figure out who you are, to figure out how strong you are, to figure out what it is that motivates you. And if you get in it and you find that you want to spend 26 years doing it, God love you, and we've succeeded. If you get into it and you learn a lot about yourself, but learn that this is not for you, then I think it's also been an accomplishment. But it's the greatest career, even given the days when your dog is the only one that loves you, and you want to give up.
I share some of the same things that Amy said. It's just those moments when you get that good feeling from whoever is giving it to you that makes you understand why we do this. You know, and I've had so many of those moments that, you know, as bad as it gets, when you just have one of those moments, it's like, this would make it all worthwhile. And, you know, I just love having those opportunities. So I would say to a young prosecutor, if you want a job where you're really going to have the impact on the lives of the people in your community, this is the type of job to have. Because we have that discretion that Dan talked about is real, and it's massive. And we, you know, the whole criminal justice reform, just the work of criminal law, the prosecutor holds such a central role to that. Okay, we are the ones that drive the train to decide whether or not the train leaves the station, whether it stays there, whether people get on or off. We're the ones that make those decisions, and that's a tremendous amount of power. So in this time where, you know, exonerations are, you know, a big thing, and, you know, everybody thinks the defense bar is wearing the white hat, they can't get their work done even without working with the prosecutor first, because, you know, we can make it easy for them, or we can make it hard for, we can make it easy for them or hard for ourselves, or vice versa. But it takes you have to have the prosecutor at the table in order for things to get moving. So, you know, this is a job. People said to me, why would you, you know, leave the bench, you know, an appellate judge at that? 1,300 judges in New York State, 55 appellate judges in the whole state. I walked away from that to become the Bronx DA. It's like, why would you do that? I was like, well, 1,300 judges, one Bronx DA, I like those odds. And I think that this is the job now, because I was always a public servant, I always will be, but this is the job that really makes the difference, so you have the impact on your community. People always say, young lawyers, oh, I want a job where I can help people. This is the job where you can really help people, the victims and the defendant. That's what I would tell them.
So it's number 3, Chris. Set Dan up and I up after Amy and Darcel, who have very aptly articulated what it's about. We get to do things that make a difference. Every day I get up and go to work. Sometimes I dread the decision that is not clear, but I'm getting a chance to decide, am I doing the right thing? I've twice practiced law in good law firms and tried a lot of cases. But I never got to sit there and debate, was I doing the right thing for society? And here we get to do that. The cases we charge, the cases we don't charge. The things that we say, the teaching we do, the mentoring we do. This is really an extraordinary opportunity. And I've twice spent a year of my life seeking election because I wanted to do this. It's a great and noble calling. It's also a huge obligation to make sure what we're doing is the right thing.
So I have 2 law schools in my town, Seattle University and University of Washington, and I've tried to get each of them to start a prosecution clinic so that students could learn the art of prosecution. And in both cases, was shot down once by the faculty that said this is not consistent with our social justice mission, and once by the students at the UW who held a candlelight vigil, and it was just ridiculous that, you know, and then I look at the faculty at neither of those schools is there anybody who's ever been a prosecutor teaching criminal law, and so we have an uphill battle, and I think we can win it one law student at a time. And what I tell people who are in law school, want to come work with us, there is no place in America where a young person just finishing school is given so much power, so much authority, and has such unlimited potential to make a difference than being a prosecutor right out of law school. You know, we give young law school grads a lot of power already. My son just graduated, he passed the bar, and I asked him every day, have you sued anybody yet? And he laughs, but I said, you could sue somebody. It's America, you have a law degree, you can sue anybody, it's awesome. But if you do that within the structure of a prosecutor's office, then the litigation that you're involved with is aimed in the right direction. So people who don't want to wait around and carry the briefcase with the senior partner going into do the motion for 10 years, you come right out of law school and we'll give you all the work you possibly want.
So just a last question. I sort of leave it to you, free form, as to what you might want to say as sort of a wrap up here. Where do we go from here? What did you get from the conference? I kind of leave it to you. Anything that I should have asked and I didn't? And we'll start with Dan this time and go the other way.
I was so moved today, the way the day started. I want to go home and find Mothers in Charge in Seattle.
On the plane tomorrow morning, I'm going to sit and write notes about all the things I learned. This is really an extraordinary group of people. Sydney did a great job of bringing us together, and some distinguished panelists. But fundamentally, we are lucky folks, because we get to do the right thing every day. Nothing better than that, folks.
I agree, and it's just so great to be with people who come from different parts of the country, but we're all trying to do the same job for our communities. And that's, you know, so important. So we can learn from each other on different ways to get this work done. So I love the exchange of ideas and, you know, just being able to share with each other that, you know, we know how hard it is, but we do have each other's back when we need to. When you need me or I need you, I know I can always reach out to you. That there's, you know, Prosecutors Center for Excellence to make sure that, you know, we stay on the cutting edges of what's happening in prosecution, that it doesn't get old, that we can move from nail them and jail them to diversion and, you know, different things of that nature that really, you know, lift people up. Those same people that years ago, 30 years ago, we're making it our business to make sure they stay in jail for as long as they can. So, you know, I'm glad to be able to do that. And most importantly, I think that this was a good exchange of ideas for us to realize that we have a role to play in the criminal justice reform arena, but we have to make sure that we don't lose focus and we don't let our victims think that we're leaving them behind or forgetting about them, because the flavor of the day, so to speak, is making sure that we do criminal justice reform for defendants. It's for both.
Tough acts to follow, but I think anytime I'm with Chris and this esteemed group of men and women, I go home with pages and pages and pages of notes, and I tend to send emails to my deputy and others saying, okay, we're going to do this, and you know, they all know that I'll be coming in ready to go on Monday. But I think the challenge for us is pretty simple. It's really about getting rid of the things that are wearing down your office, the things that are driving everybody crazy and causing everyone to die a slow death, and not moving the public safety needle. Get those out of the way so that we can do everything we can within our offices and within our communities to move that public safety needle. Because at the end of the day, that's what our job is to make our communities safer for the children that live there today and the children that will live there 20, 30 years down the road. But conferences like this and hearing from all of you is a great way to do it. I've already checked. There's not a Mothers in Charge chapter in Memphis, Tennessee, so that is on my list of things to do. But I think it's also great just to know that we're all there, because we're there to bounce ideas off of, but we're also there because from time to time, knuckleheads from Memphis will find their way to the Bronx, and I will need somebody's help there, and vice versa. So by all means, call me and pick my brain or ask me what not to do, because I can certainly tell you how to avoid mistakes. But thanks again to Chris and to Sim for putting this all together and getting us together. And the other thing that I think we can't ever lose sight of is we are the voice for the victims. And every day we have to take every opportunity we can to say that to somebody, whether it's a local reporter or whoever that might be. But we have to every day remember that we are the only person in the courtroom fighting for the victims and for their families.
Well, thank you very much. Please give a hand to our